Imagine a world as advanced as it was enigmatic, where extraordinary beings coexisted with humans, and mankind possessed forbidden knowledge that defied our current understanding. A world engulfed by devastating waters, leaving deep marks on our history and spirituality. The story of the biblical flood is not merely a natural disaster. It reveals hidden truths about divine purpose, human corruption, and the salvation of a remnant. Today, we will unveil the mysteries of this ancient narrative and discover eternal lessons that still resonate today. In the beginning, God created the world with a clear purpose, for man to live in harmony with creation, reflecting his glory through a full and righteous life. The Garden of Eden symbolized this perfection. There, Adam and Eve walked alongside God, in perfect communion with the Creator. Nature was balanced, peace reigned among the animals, and abundance filled every aspect of life. The task of tending the garden was not a burden, but an honorable and joyful vocation. However, this harmony was not just a reflection of creation, but an extension of the relationship man had with God. Trust and obedience were the pillars of this coexistence. Adam and Eve had the privilege of living without pain, death, or conflict. All of creation responded to human command, and there was a natural order that manifested divine majesty in every detail. Yet, this perfection depended on a fundamental element: free will. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil, located in the center of the garden, represented the choice between trusting in divine wisdom or following the path of independence. When Eve was deceived by the serpent and Adam chose to disobey God, this harmony was shattered. Sin affected not only humans, but corrupted all of creation. This corruption brought not only physical death, but also spiritual separation between God and man. The world, created to reflect divine glory, became a place of pain, suffering, and violence. The fall of Adam and Eve was not just the failure of two individuals, but the starting point for the fall of all humanity. Eden, with all its beauty, was left behind, and humanity began a journey of progressively distancing itself from the divine purpose. After the fall, corruption quickly spread across the earth. The generations that followed Adam and Eve rapidly strayed from God's path. The first significant sign of this was Abel's murder by his brother Cain. This tragic event symbolizes how sin was not limited to an isolated act in the Garden of Eden, but grew and multiplied over time. Violence became a characteristic of humanity. As the pre-flood civilization expanded, new forms of wickedness emerged. The Bible tells us that the wickedness of man multiplied on earth, and every imagination of his thoughts was only evil continually. These were not merely isolated acts of sin, but a systemic corruption that affected every sphere of life. Cities began to grow, and with them, technologies and advances that, instead of bringing man closer to God, distanced him even further. Material progress, without an equivalent moral progress, resulted in a society where violence and injustice became normal. The longevity of men in that era, often lasting centuries, allowed evil to perpetuate and expand at a frightening rate. Men like Lamech boasted of their violent deeds, and the world grew increasingly dangerous. This civilization, which possessed vast knowledge and abilities, was marked by an unchecked growth of moral and spiritual corruption. With each generation, the chasm between man and God deepened. The world, which was meant to reflect God's holiness and justice, had become unrecognizable. Amid this darkness, only a remnant remained faithful, awaiting divine intervention. One of the most intriguing aspects of the flood narrative is the mention of the Nephilim, giants who inhabited the earth. The Bible describes them as powerful beings, heroes of old, and men of renown. But who were these mysterious beings, and why is their presence associated with humanity's growing corruption? Many interpretations suggest that the Nephilim were the offspring of fallen angels and human women, creating hybrid beings with abilities and knowledge beyond the ordinary. The Nephilim are described as giants, not only in stature, but also in influence and power. They dominated pre-flood society, contributing to technological advancement, but also to moral decay. Their rise marks the peak of human degradation, where knowledge and power were used to oppress and control, rather than to build and promote justice. Their influence was so great that their presence is mentioned as one of the reasons God decided to destroy that generation. These giants symbolize what happens when power and knowledge are divorced from morality and obedience to God. They were admired figures by many, but in God's eyes, they represented extreme corruption. Their actions contributed to the destruction of society's ethical foundations, and their existence, the result of a union contrary to divine order, accelerated the judgment that was to come. However, no matter how powerful they were, the Nephilim could not escape the fate that awaited the earth. When the flood came, they were submerged along with the rest of humanity. Their fall serves as a reminder that no force, no matter how grand, can stand against God's sovereign plan. They vanished, but the mystery surrounding them still sparks debates and speculation. Amid so much corruption and violence, God decided to intervene drastically. The Bible tells us that He regretted creating man, so great was the wickedness that had spread across the world. This regret, however, should not be interpreted as a change of divine opinion, but rather as an expression of pain and sorrow over humanity's alienation. God then makes a decision. The world needs a new beginning, and the means for this will be the flood. In this chaos, the figure of Noah emerges. The Bible tells us that Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. He was a righteous man, blameless among his people, and walked with God. It was to this man that God revealed His plan, to destroy the earth with a flood, but preserve creation through an ark. Noah received detailed instructions to build this gigantic vessel, which would be the refuge for his family and representatives of all animal species. The announcement of the flood was not made impulsively. God gave humanity a long period of warning while Noah built the ark and preached righteousness. For decades, the ark's construction served as a visible reminder of the impending judgment. Noah, with his faith and obedience, became a symbol of resistance to corruption and a beacon of hope amid the growing darkness. This long period of construction and preaching is one of the clearest demonstrations of God's patience. He does not bring judgment without first offering opportunities for repentance. However, humanity responded with scorn, continuing in its ways, unaware of the divine warning, until the moment God shut the door of the ark and the waters began to fall upon the earth. The ark's construction was a true test of faith for Noah and his family. God's instructions were detailed and required monumental effort. The ark was to measure about 150 meters in length, 25 meters in width, and 15 meters in height, with 3 decks and compartments for the animals. Made of gopher wood and coated with pitch to make it waterproof, this vessel was not designed for navigation, but for survival. Imagine the reaction of Noah's contemporaries upon seeing this gigantic structure take shape. A project so grand, built on dry land, far from any source of water, must have caused bewilderment and mockery. But Noah persevered. For decades, he and his family worked diligently, following God's instructions. Each hammer strike on the wood was an act of faith, a visible testimony of his trust in God's promises. The ark was not just a physical construction, but a symbol of the salvation offered by God in the midst of judgment. Just as Noah was called to prepare a refuge for his family and the animals, we are also called to build our lives on faith in God, trusting that He will provide a way of escape amid life's storms. The ark represents divine grace amid chaos. Moreover, the construction of the ark teaches us the importance of detailed obedience to God's commands. Noah did not question the instructions, even when they seemed unusual or unnecessary. He knew God had a plan and trusted that by following every detail, He was fulfilling the divine purpose. This lesson resonates to this day, reminding us that faith often requires concrete action and perseverance, even when we do not immediately see the results. In the end, the ark became the means by which creation was preserved. When the waters covered the earth and everything else was destroyed, the ark floated in safety. Inside, it was the promise of a new beginning, a new chapter for humanity and creation. Noah, through his faith and obedience, actively participated in God's plan of redemption. After decades of preparation and preaching by Noah, the time came for God to act. The flood, long foretold, finally began. The Bible tells us that in Noah's 600th year, all the fountains of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. What followed was a cataclysmic event of unprecedented scale. Water poured not only from above, but also from the depths of the earth, as if the entire planet were collapsing under the weight of divine judgment. Imagine the scene. The sky, which had never shed a drop of rain, was now covered in black clouds. The sound of waters gushing from the depths and torrents falling from the heavens must have been deafening. For those who had ignored Noah's warning, terror was immediate. Bodies of water began to overflow, and cities were quickly submerged. There was no place to hide. God's judgment could not be avoided. Inside the ark, Noah and his family must have felt the magnitude of what was happening around them. The vessel, which once seemed like a strange, out-of-place construction, was now the only refuge in a completely devastated world. Noah's trust in God was being rewarded in a terrifying yet magnificent way. He knew that the destruction had been necessary due to the unbearable corruption that had overtaken the planet. As the flood continued, the ark was lifted by the waters and began to float. The rain lasted 40 days and 40 nights, but the waters continued to rise for another 150 days. No mountain was visible, and the world Noah knew was completely wiped out. During this time, the ark was the only point of life in an ocean of destruction. All the earth's inhabitants had been judged, and only Noah and those with him inside the ark were spared. The flood represents God's righteous judgment against extreme corruption, but it is also a demonstration of his grace. Though he decided to wipe out sinful humanity, he preserved Noah and his family as a faithful remnant, ensuring that life on earth could begin anew. The flood is a solemn warning to us, reminding us that God is just in his judgment, but always merciful to those who trust in him. Life inside the ark, though a refuge of salvation, also represented daily challenges for Noah and his family. For over a year, they lived confined in a closed space, surrounded by thousands of animals of all kinds, not knowing exactly how long they would have to wait before they could disembark. The ark was a microcosm of the new world God was recreating, and Noah had the responsibility of caring for all the creatures entrusted to him by God. The daily interaction with the animals and maintaining the conditions inside the ark must have required constant planning and effort. Noah and his sons probably had to follow a strict routine of feeding and cleaning to ensure everyone's survival. Additionally, the constant rocking of the ark and the ceaseless sound of rain and wind outside must have created an atmosphere of tension. Noah's faith was tested every day inside the ark. He had obeyed God by building the ark, but now he had to trust that God would fulfill his promise to preserve them and bring the flood to an end. The ark then becomes a symbol not only of physical salvation, but also of spiritual perseverance. Noah did not have a clear vision of when the flood would end, but he knew God was in control, even when everything around him was chaos. Besides the practical aspects, there was also the emotional and spiritual factor. Noah knew that he and his family were the only survivors of an event that had wiped out all human life outside the ark. The responsibility he bore was enormous, for it would fall to him and his descendants to repopulate the earth and restart the history of humanity. This required deep trust in God and total submission to his plan. This experience teaches us lessons about perseverance and trust. Often in our lives, we face periods of waiting and uncertainty, but Noah's story reminds us that, even amid the storm, God is in control. Life in the ark shows us that, in the midst of chaos and darkness, faith is our anchor and security, sustaining us until the moment God reveals his next step. After months of rain and destruction, the floodwaters finally began to recede. Noah and his family first sensed that judgment was ending when the ark stopped floating and rested on the mountains of Ararat. The Bible tells us that the waters began to decrease in the 10th month, and the tops of the mountains became visible. This was the first sign that the new world was emerging from beneath the waters. Still, Noah did not rush to leave the ark. He patiently waited for a sign from God, demonstrating unwavering trust. To test whether the land was dry, Noah sent out a raven, which flew back and forth but did not return with good news. Then, he sent out a dove, which returned with an olive leaf, a sign that the waters were receding and vegetation was beginning to grow again. 7 days later, Noah sent out the dove again, and this time, it did not return, indicating that it had found a place to settle. This moment of waiting teaches us the importance of waiting for God's timing. Even though the waters were receding, Noah knew it was not yet time to act hastily. He patiently waited until God told him to leave the ark. This gesture of obedience and trust is a powerful example of how we should seek divine guidance before making significant decisions in our lives. When Noah finally left the ark, he stepped into a transformed world. The landscape he once knew had been completely reshaped by the waters. What he saw was a purified world, ready for a new beginning. This is a reminder that even in the midst of destruction, God is always working to bring renewal and life. The flood may have destroyed the old world, but it also paved the way for the creation of something new and better. This process of the waters receding symbolizes relief after the storm, the end of a period of judgment, and the beginning of a new era of hope. The new world Noah found was an opportunity to start over and follow God's plans with renewed faithfulness. Just as Noah patiently waited for God's sign, we are called to trust that after our personal storms, God will guide us to a new beginning. Upon disembarking from the ark, Noah's first act was to build an altar and offer sacrifices to God. This gesture symbolized gratitude and the recognition that it was God's grace that had preserved his life and that of his family. Noah's sacrifice was a response of worship to the deliverance God had provided, and it also marked the beginning of a new relationship between God and humanity. The Bible tells us that God was pleased with the soothing aroma of the sacrifice and made a promise. Never again will I curse the ground because of humans, even though every inclination of the human heart is evil from childhood. And never again will I destroy all living creatures, as I have done. This covenant between God and Noah was a significant milestone, signaling God's commitment to sustaining life on earth despite humanity's sinful inclination. Noah's sacrifice also teaches us an important lesson about gratitude and worship. Even after experiencing such a traumatic event as the flood, Noah recognized that his family's salvation was a direct act of God's mercy. His first act was to honor the Creator, placing God at the center of his new beginning. This gesture is a reminder that, after going through trials and being preserved, our first response should be one of praise and gratitude to God. The altar Noah built was the first of many altars in the Bible that symbolize worship and acknowledgement of God's lordship. Just as Noah offered a sacrifice of gratitude, we are called to offer our lives as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. Gratitude and worship are natural responses to the grace and mercy God continually shows in our lives. This moment of sacrifice was followed by a new covenant between God and humanity. The rainbow that appeared in the sky as a sign of this covenant is a promise that, even though humanity continues to sin, God will never again destroy the earth with a flood. This covenant reflects God's patience and mercy, who, despite human sinfulness, chooses to preserve life and give humanity a new opportunity to start afresh. After Noah's sacrifice, God made a covenant with him and all creation, promising never to destroy the earth with a flood again. As a sign of this covenant, God created the rainbow, a natural phenomenon that would serve as an eternal reminder of divine grace. The rainbow was the first visible sign of a covenant between God and humanity, a symbol of hope amid the storms, and a reminder that God's mercy always prevails. The rainbow was not just a natural phenomenon, but a visible manifestation of God's commitment. He said, "I set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth." This symbol represents the peace God established between himself and creation, even after the severe judgment of the flood. The rainbow reminds humanity that, though sin is still present, God is committed to the preservation of life. Whenever we see a rainbow in the sky, we should remember this promise from God. It assures us that, even amid difficulties and trials, his mercy is greater than judgment. The rainbow is a sign that, despite human corruption, God is long-suffering and always willing to offer new opportunities for redemption and a fresh start. The Rainbow Covenant also teaches us about God's faithfulness. He keeps his promises, even when humanity fails to keep its own. This covenant with Noah foreshadows the great covenant God would later make through Jesus Christ, where ultimate mercy would be revealed and salvation made available to all who believe. The rainbow, then, points to the greater grace that would be revealed in the future. Finally, the rainbow invites us to trust in God, even in times of tribulation. It reminds us that, even when the storms of life seem endless, there is always a promise of redemption and renewal on the horizon. Just as the rainbow appears after the rain, God's mercy always shines after moments of judgment and suffering. After the flood, Noah and his family received God's command to multiply and fill the earth. This mandate was a renewal of God's original purpose for humanity, given to Adam and Eve in Eden. Now, in a renewed world, humanity would have a new opportunity to live according to God's plans. Noah and his descendants were charged with repopulating the earth and establishing a new civilization based on divine principles. The new beginning, however, was not free of challenges. Though the flood had purified the earth, sin still resided in the human heart. Humanity would have to deal with the same temptations and inclinations that had caused the destruction of the previous world. Noah and his family were aware that life in the new world would require obedience and continuous dependence on God to avoid the mistakes of the past. God's command to multiply and fill the earth was a reminder that life is a divine gift. Even after such a devastating event as the flood, God desired life to flourish again. He is a God of renewal, always willing to give new chances and to start afresh with those who trust in Him. The earth's renewed fertility would now be a testament to God's restorative power. The new era of prosperity, however, was to be marked by reverence for God. The Rainbow Covenant and God's instructions to Noah made it clear that humanity was to live in covenant with the Creator, respecting His laws and maintaining the sanctity of life. The new beginning after the flood was an opportunity for humanity to correct the mistakes of the past and live according to the purpose for which it had been created. This renewal of humanity reflects God's grace, who, despite sin, never gives up on His original plan for creation. Even when everything seems lost, He can renew and restore, giving humanity new opportunities to live in communion with Him. Just as Noah was called to multiply and prosper, we are invited to live in obedience to God, taking advantage of the opportunities for renewal that He offers us. The story of the flood teaches us valuable lessons about God's nature and humanity's relationship with the Creator. The first lesson we can draw is the seriousness with which God regards sin. The flood was a response to humanity's extreme corruption, showing that God does not tolerate evil indefinitely. Judgment is a reality, and God's holiness requires that sin be confronted. However, amid judgment, we also see God's abundant grace. He could have destroyed all of humanity, but chose to preserve Noah and his family, offering creation a second chance. The ark is a powerful symbol of the salvation God offers to those who trust in His promises. Just as Noah was saved from the floodwaters, we are also invited to seek refuge in the salvation God offers through Christ. God's patience is another important lesson. He gave humanity decades to repent, while Noah built the ark. This divine patience reflects God's desire for all to come to repentance, as we read in 2 Peter 3:9. Though judgment is certain, God offers opportunities for repentance and salvation to all who are willing to hear His voice. The story of the flood also reminds us of the importance of obedience and faith. Noah was called to obey God in a time of great disbelief and corruption. He built the ark based on a divine promise, even when everything around him seemed to indicate otherwise. His faith was rewarded with the salvation of his family and the beginning of a new era. Obedience to God is always the path to true security and blessing. Finally, the Rainbow Covenant teaches us about God's faithfulness. He made a covenant with Noah and all creation, promising never to destroy the earth with a flood again. This covenant is a reminder that, despite challenges and trials, God is faithful to His promises. Just as He preserved Noah's life, He continues to sustain us and offer new opportunities for redemption and renewal in our lives. The story of the flood is one of the most profound in the Bible, revealing the perfect balance between God's judgment and His infinite mercy. The destruction of a corrupt civilization serves as a solemn reminder of the seriousness of sin, but it also points to the divine grace that always offers a new chance for a fresh start. Just as Noah was saved by his faith and obedience, we are invited to seek refuge in God, trusting that He fulfills His promises and guides us through the storms of life. May this story continue to teach us to live with gratitude, reverence, and hope.